So, working from home, obviously, being forced upon that situation brings its own challenges, and no greater challenge than cybersecurity and the considerations that we need to actually sort of bring on board and understand a little bit better, perhaps, than we used to. Things that we took for granted, like just accessing the internet, now can be a very treacherous ordeal if we've got other people that share that network with us, and especially if they're not as conscientious as us. There are many things that we can do to protect ourselves, and the idea really of this presentation is to just step through various aspects of cybersecurity and be able to explain a few of the threats and the vulnerabilities and how we can address those. So, entitled Elephant in the Room, we have an elephant there. It's a big one. It is cybersecurity, and it's one of those subjects that people do try to sort of dismiss. It won't happen to me. I'm fine. I don't go on those sites. But it's not necessarily as simple as that. In a world that's ever becoming sort of a digital environment, just consider your own home, for example. If you're locking your valuables away in a cellar that belongs to a house that's only got one door, no windows, and a padlock on the gate, your valuables are going to be pretty secure. But the moment we add more windows to the house, the moment we put a back door in to exit and to enter from the back garden, put a hatch in the roof, all those kind of things suddenly makes our home and our valuables very vulnerable. And that's the same with the digital world. Just a simple wired network can suddenly become much more of a target, opening that vector by just adding Wi-Fi. Just maybe sharing that internet connection with the kids, adding some IoT devices, internet things like you're controlling your lights or your heating. Those kind of things are just music to a hacker's ears, and they're inevitably easy ways into your business, your home working, your private life even. And the whole thing about cybersecurity is built on the three triads of security, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Any one of those three that gets pulled apart, dropped, your information security is gone. Obviously, the confidentiality is straightforward. Your information has to be secure, integral, and not available to people that shouldn't have it and are not authorized to do that. The integrity means that it's got to stay as it was when it was presented, so it can't be changed without authorization. And availability is that information has to be available to the people that need it. So people think of availability like DDoS attacks, where whole websites have gone down because botnets have attacked it. And the idea behind that kind of attack is the availability attack. So it's stopping people using that service. And that can be on a micro level as well. There's things that can happen at a micro level that stops you using something, and that's also considered an availability attack. So this battle between good and evil has been going on for quite some time now. It's been there ever since, well, really from from way back when ciphers first were introduced, and way back with sort of in the Middle Ages, when they were trying to pass information backwards and forwards, and having code breakers and doing silly little sort of ciphers that just transpose different letters. From that point on, there was good and there was evil in the cyber code breaking world. Interestingly, the first malicious internet code was released in 1989. And that was a worm that just scattered around servers. And then a ransomware attack, believe it or not, in 1989 was issued via a floppy disk. And that floppy disk was given to all the attendees of the World Health Organization. And it affected most of them. and I think they were being charged $189 to unlock their information. And then we move on to sort of 1999, 10 years later, with getting a bit more serious then, 1 million accounts being affected from an email virus. And then 2013, where 14 million credit cards were stolen in the first data breach. And then 2014, where 500 million records were stolen from Yahoo. It goes on and on. And people now realize that it's not a case of we won't be hacked, but when will you be hacked? Because it's inevitable. Nothing, absolutely nothing is impenetrable. It's a case of you've got to prepare for this situation, have a response to be able to do the best you can in that kind of situation, whether that's just an email coming in or whether that's online data that's been stolen. And even now, it's so easy to get an attack underway. You can just go onto the dark web. You can purchase a service online that can run a DDoS attack, and that service will provide you with a dashboard, and you'll be able to see how well your DDoS attack is going and how many people have been affected. Even with ransomware, you can see how much money you've built up, and there's support as well. They provide support for you to actually call a help desk to help you with your ransomware attack. Incredible. So in the kill chain, this is something that Lockheed Martin put together to try to understand the process that this hack would go through. There are 7 stages. Reconnaissance is the first stage. Then we go into weaponizing a piece of code, and then how that's delivered, maybe by email or USB or via a web link, and then how it's exploited, what you can do, installing then additional malware and getting that command and control center up and running. So this is where you get companies that have hackers sitting in their network very quietly. They're sitting there, they're watching, they're understanding what's going on, and they'll then wait to strike to achieve their objective. What I like to do is sort of focus in on this sort of area here, reconnaissance, because it's an area that if you can stop at the beginning, then you tend not to have so many attacks further down the line. So the Recon Step uses sort of open source intelligence, and that's all about freely available information. So you're not actually breaking any laws when you start the process. You're actually just searching for information that's available to everyone. And there's so many tools out there that you can use. And a really good site to go and have a look at, if you're interested, is this osintframework.com. And that shows you, if you click on each one of these links, then it shows you then and expands on the areas that you can look at. So social networks, what can you do? Well, there's Facebook. From Facebook, what can you do? There's searching, analytics, archive documents. And then if you expand further, it shows you, exactly how to do these kind of things. So there's absolutely thousands of ways of achieving this. And once you've got a target, then it's not very hard to get as much information as you need to identify who they are, where they live, who they work for, what they do, how they do it, photographs they've uploaded. Piece everything together. Once you've got that information, you pull it into a piece of software that can analyze that and start to use that information to provide assumptions, and then provide samples of spearfishing emails that might appeal to them. And it's from there that you really then get into trouble if you're not careful with those emails, because that's then moving on to the next stage. So I focus on, in this kind of step, your web presence. So your domain name, the information that's on that domain name, how long has it been registered for? Also security headers in your website. Do they stop malware being added to your website? Sort of third-party resources, do they cause a problem? Is there any information leaks on your website? can you scan it for vulnerabilities? Are there any vulnerabilities? And then pen testing is the sort of the ultimate step, whereby we're not using scanning tools to go in there and automatically say, well, we're comparing your site to these 3,500 known vulnerabilities, and it's clean. But then with the pen test hat on, you can go in and actually find that by doing something a little bit different, something that perhaps wasn't sort of expected, out of the norm, then you've got access to elevate your privileges perhaps and be able to access information as an administrator, or you can sidestep your privileges and look at other information that's maybe about someone else or about another company. So these are the kind of attacks a pen tester looks for. So the main threats at home are the phishing and the spear phishing. So the phishing is the general email that we all get that we know are keen, that has got some spare cash that needs to be pushed through to an account, your account, but you'll get a healthy kickback if you can help him out. So that's the traditional, or if you need help and assistance in the bedroom, click here, that kind of thing. Spear phishing is a little bit more pointed, and it will identify who you are. It's like me sending an email to Paul, having done some recon on him, knowing that I'm likely to sort of tickle his buttons by certain things I put in there, even impersonate someone else that he might know and pretend the email's from that person, and then just add a document or add a link, and away you go. You've got some malware on your system potentially. That can lead to ransomware, unauthorized access, and the list goes on. So these threats can build up. They can be very, very small to the very large. So you can look at having your network hacked. You can lose your privacy. You can lose data. Invoicing fraud is another one. Business process compromise, and also business email compromise are two new, well, emails not so much, because email compromise is all about just pretending to be someone else, having access to their account and sending emails out from their account as a genuine sort of source, but obviously by a hacker. The business process compromise is a little bit different. It's something that's coming up and it's new, and it's about waiting inside of an organization, changing their documentation very slightly, just so that their processes and their procedures change, and they are very unaware of what's happening. But those changes, although small, may be catastrophic for that business. So that's business process compromise. Types of hackers that are out there, well, there's white hats, black hats, grey hats. There's all sorts of colour hats, honestly. There's blue, green, and all sorts as well, but I didn't put them on here because they're a little bit more extreme. But there's script kiddies, and there's these national sponsored hackers, state sponsored hackers, activists, malicious insiders that people forget about. They're sometimes the worst, and botnets. So any type of hacker could decide that you're a target. It's really, it depends on that OWASP stage, really. Have they found enough about you that would interest them to take it further? So what I advocate to everyone in business, whatever size really, if they have no, and obviously the larger organizations start to have their own internal IT teams, but with the smaller companies that are using outside contractors, they're aware, but they don't necessarily listen to those outside contractors. But I try to instill at least a baseline of cyber essentials, something that was introduced by the government in 2014. And it's all about trying to protect you from those phishing attacks, the malware, ransomware, password guessing, and the network attacks. It does it in a very simple way. So this is information you can get from the Gov site, and I can distribute it if you need it, but it covers 5 control areas, so firewalls, configuration, access control, malware, and patch management. The demonstrations I'm going to show you now are all to do with Windows 10 Pro and not the Home Edition. There's things in the Pro that are much, much better. I would encourage anyone to use the Pro over the Home Edition for the following reasons. So start with the firewalls. We'll zip through this because we've already had 31 minutes already, I think. What's the time now? Oh, no, it's not so much. So firewalls, make sure you've got one. So the objective of the firewall control is to ensure only safe and necessary network services can be accessed from the internet. So what does that mean? Well, it just means that you've got to have routers. And most of us have got routers. It depends on how old they are and when they were updated last. And the first line of defense is provided by your internet provider, really, when they provide your router. A lot of people will just fit that in. I know, I'm sure that the people that are attending today have this in hand without any doubt, but the wider population might just get their router delivered if it's an upgrade, and they'll just plonk it in and they'll just connect it up and away they go, not really considering what it's doing. And these days it should be fine. It should be a lot better than it used to be. They used to send them out with default passwords that everyone knew and you could find on the internet, and it wasn't very long before you're into the admin console and you're playing around with the settings and setting up your nice little nest ready to do some intrusion. Most of the routers these days come with a unique password at the bottom, and you have to put that in. I always advise changing that anyway, because that's just the paranoia in me, really, but they're much better. One thing you do, you can test your router by going to somewhere like Shields Up, which is a service provided by grc.com, Gibson Research Laboratory. This is the kind of display you'll get. So over here on the right hand side, you've got this display. This will scan the most common ports. I think it's 1056 common ports there that it chooses, and it will scan to see if they're open or closed or if they're in stealth mode. Best thing to have is in stealth mode, but it's free and it's a very good, reliable service that can be used. You can then look at obviously making sure that your firmware is updated. Now this is something that a lot of people will forget about. Once your router's in, that's it. But it's always handy to check every now and again to make sure the firmware is updated, because a lot of the times it's not automatic. You have to do it yourself. And then if you have to open your firewall up to the internet for whatever reason, make sure you restrict it by an IP address. Again, that's normally fairly straightforward if you've got access to the console and you're a little bit au fait with what's going on. So that's the first line of defense, the router element here on your device from your IP ISP provider. Then you've got your PC. So hopefully you've got at least Windows 10 and you're not running an older version of Windows that isn't so secure. Or if you're using alternatives, then you've got an up-to-date version of a Linux product and an antivirus package that may have its own built-in firewall. So from a cyber essentials point of view, secure configuration is another key important control. So ensure that computers and network devices are properly configured to make sure they reduce the level of inherent vulnerabilities and provide only the service required to fulfill their role. And that's important because these days, certainly computers, when you get them, you buy them from PC World, they're full of everything that you don't necessarily need. So it's all about removing things like your guest accounts and unused accounts, maybe disabling the auto run feature, turning off or uninstalling applications that you don't need. You don't need Candy Floss or whatever it's called installed on your PC when you get a brand new PC, if you're a business user. And have policies to ensure that the introduction of a new piece of equipment onto your network is actually handled in a secure way. So it follows a procedure, and all of those new PCs that are introduced are following that same procedure, going through setting up accounts, disabling accounts that aren't used, also making sure that software is available to the person for their role and their role only. So another crucial part of this secure configuration element is the passwords, making sure that your password that you use is secure. Change the default passwords on all equipment, as I've mentioned before, and especially if you've got an IoT device and you can change the password, then change the password to the admin console immediately. You get it. Don't reuse same passwords for different things. Certainly not your Windows password on a website. There's an article last week about Zoom, and there's a lot of press about Zoom, and I think Zoom have done an awful lot to try to sort of get over the initial security concerns that we had. It went from a relatively small organization to something that's critical to the world infrastructure overnight almost. So it's reacted very well to the security criticisms that's had. But I noticed, and again, perhaps this is a spin on the journalism, just to invoke fear and panic. But a headline said, I think it was 40 million users' information, the credentials from Zoom users had been exposed, and this wasn't quite right. It was actually the users that have been compromised were the users that had already been breached, and it was through a credential stuffing attack, which is where a piece of software sits there and tries the combination of an email address and a password multiple times to try to get into these accounts. That it was a case of, it wasn't Zoom's fault at all necessarily, although they perhaps should have something in there to stop the retries. It was down to people using the same password multiple times, which isn't good at all. So what I recommend is using a password phrase with a few dots and dashes in, and maybe a few special characters, something you can remember easily. And I would say this kind of thing should be used perhaps on your password manager. So I really advocate getting a password manager, and then using a really strong password to access that password manager, because there's no point having a password manager if your password is monkey, because people will then suddenly have access to your world, no matter how hard you try. So I use a password manager called Password Safe. I use it on my Linux machines, on my Windows machines, on my Android phone, on my iPhone and iPad. It's a cross-platform service that's open source. It's free on the desktops, but it's actually charged on some applications. So the apps will charge you a small fee, but it's well worth it, and it gives you peace of mind because you can generate a random password and you don't have to remember it anymore. You just go into the device, and it's a little bit more hassle, but there's a trade-off between the aggravation element and the security element. It's down to individuals to get that balance right, but I always err on the side of the security. So password managers aren't a hassle to me. They're a savior, they're a godsend. And make sure you set your password policy up so that it gives you a password that's a reasonable size. I set my password policy up to 16 characters, including some special characters, having some uppercase and some lowercase characters, include numbers. And I also have an option, and within this you can see an option to include or not include similar characters. So it would never include a 0 and an O, or an I and a 1, just to make things a little easier, because the last thing you want to do is get it wrong, be locked out, and then have the hassle of doing that. Um, you should also, where possible, have two-factor authentication enabled. So things like Facebook, for example, you can have two-factor authentication enabled, which means that no one can hack your Facebook page by guessing your password or trying to get in, or even if they had a keylogger on your system and you they saw the password you entered, you still couldn't get in to the obviously you've got to log out, or if you're coming in from a different device, you'll always have to use the two-factor authentication. It's well worth doing that, so use it wherever. And again, always check your password username, sorry, not your password, your username with haveibeenpwned.com, which is a great service. Excuse me, it allows you to put in your password, sorry, not password, it allows you to put in your email address and then discover whether it's been part of a breach or two. If it has, there are things you can do to sort of minimize your exposure. The best thing is to scrap that email and move on with a different email. But if you can't, then never on multiple sites or services. So the third element of the cyber essentials is the access control. So access control objective is about the user accounts. So are assigned accounts authorized to access what they need? Do they have access to certain elements of the network they shouldn't have? What applications do they really need for their role? And this is again one of those really quick wins, but valuable, very valuable for many different reasons. I always advocate users and their day-to-day work being standard users within their PCs. So if you buy a new PC, you normally, the first thing you do is log in. You are an administrator of that PC, which means you can do anything without putting in that password again and again. There are controls you can switch on to sort of thwart the vulnerability of a person logged in as an administrator, but I would never do it, because if you are unfortunate enough to be attacked in maybe a phishing attack or phishing attack, and you click on a link, if you get to the stage where malware is trying to install on your PC, if you're in as an administrator, it has access to everything. So it has access to your complete network and your operating system, so you can have anything installed. Going in as a standard user, if you want to install anything, you will always get a prompt, and you always have to log in as an administrator. So if you don't know what that is, or you forgot it because it's a nice strong password, then it puts that extra step in your way to ask the question, do I need this software? Is it worth me finding my software, finding my password in the password manager to install this? Not really. No, I'm not going to bother. So it's a good door to open to the question. So standard users are really good. Remove those unused accounts always, at least disable them. I've mentioned two-factor authentication already, so that would be my recommendation if you're going onto servers or you're going into administration zones. If two-factor is available, then use it. When you have that situation where you've split your usage, so your day-to-day is a standard user, and your administration level access is through an administrator account, make sure you disable web browsing and email, because those again are two vulnerable areas that, and this is something that the control states you've got to do. So if you're logged in as an administrator, you've got to not allow web browsing or email. So it's a bit tricky, because you have to go in perhaps as a standard user, download some software that you want to install, make sure it's sandboxed. I'll show you that later. And then it's sitting there waiting for you to log in as an administrator and install that if necessary. So a couple of other things on policy. I mentioned policies earlier on. They are important, and I do briefly touch on them later, is the need for onboarding policy for new staff. Make sure they follow the right process. Make sure you assign them the right access rights and application privileges. Similarly, when they leave, you've got to make sure that you have the controls in place to remove them from the network. Make sure they give back all the data they may have had in their normal roles and so on. Malware. What's malware? So obviously we've got to restrict the running of harmful code. There's many ways of doing this. So the three key areas are antivirus software. I've got to make sure that those chats don't appear for me. So antivirus software. So that protects you against your ransomware, and you can have, certainly within Windows, protected folders and whitelist applications, which I recommend switching on if you haven't switched them on already. Again, a little bit of hassle, but worth doing. Whitelisting, so you're logging in as a standard user, again, is important. Things like app locker tools and policies to restrict what applications can be installed are important, and maybe only running software that's signed, officially signed. And then sandboxing is the third preferred way. Windows, again, if you've got Home Edition, you don't have access to this, but if you've got Pro Edition, you've got access to a new feature. It's been out about a year, so it's not that new, but it allows you to create a sandbox within your Windows 10, which is another actual PC inside of your PC. And you can do things like you can run malware. If you've got some information that's coming through on a PDF and you don't want to open it on your PC, you can open up a Windows sandbox, and you can open it up within your sandbox. And even if it's malicious, it won't affect your operating system because it's all sandboxed completely. Maybe some .exe files or some PowerPoint presentations or anything like that you're a little bit suspicious of, always copy them and paste them into the sandbox, run that sandbox, and you're protected. There's also a Windows Defender application guard as well, which is part of the Edge browser, which allows you to sandbox your browser experience. Again, that isolates completely. It takes a little while to run. It's a little bit slower, but it's worth doing. And also, ultimately, you can go to a virtual machine. So you can have a machine inside of a machine inside of a machine, and have all those layers of sandbox protection if you want to run something, or you want to go to certain sites that maybe you're not sure of for whatever reason. I won't question that. So patch management is the final control. I'm conscious of the time because we do want to run into some questions. So patch management is all about making sure your software is up to date, making sure that you've got the ability to sort of update your firmware. If it's deemed as a high risk, it should be applied within 14 days. I just recommend putting on automatic updates on your PC so that they automatically, certainly the operating system and anything like Word or Adobe products will then automatically update. There is a patch manager or patch manager there that you can try. I've not tried this yet. It's got some good reviews, but it's free for up to 25 devices. I'm going to investigate that a little further, but worth noting anyway. So those are all the things there, and I've put this detail, I'm not going to go through it, but in the slide so that you can use it if you want to refer to it at a later date. Those are the 5 controls that you need to understand for Cyber Essentials. On the face of it, it's a very easy control to implement and will give you a lot of protection. Policies I've mentioned, these are some good policies that you may want to consider. So password policy, access control, again, list who has access to what information within your organization, what applications can access that information, the introduction of new hardware, your encryption policy, software authorization policy, social media policy, computer usage, incident response, general security policy, and maybe a mobile device policy. Those are all the kind of policies that you should consider sort of bringing on to your organization. Excuse me. So that's the sort of formal bit out the way. There's some tips now that I want to provide you. There's a lot of information here again. I'm going to get my pen and start sort of scribbling around. But these are the kind of things that you can sort of use to help protect you when you're browsing. So uBlock Origin is a great tool. It's basically an ad blocker plus, if you like. It's worth installing on your browsers, and it covers all the major browsers, and it stops pop-ups, and it stops JavaScript running in the background if you want it to, and you can go in and analyze who's trying to sort of behind the scenes open up links or windows and where they've come from. And it's quite interesting to have a look at if you're sad like me. It's quite interesting. There's lots of sort of clickbait ads that pop up every now and again. You think some sites have 20 or 30 different ads that are all being blocked, and there's that moral question about adverts and free stuff that you can get into, but I do like using uBlock Origin. Another thing I recommend is going private, so incognito, and this over here is the sort of drop down of from Edge. You can open a new tab, you can open a new window, you can open an in private window, or you can open this new application guard window, which is the sandbox window. Now you've got to set this up, so you need to go into your Windows features and switch this on. So there's a little bit of a hassle, but worth doing, because that's the sandbox. That whatever you do in that window, everything will be destroyed once you close that window down. So it's worth noting that it is a pure sandbox, and whatever sites you go to, even if you go to malware sites, it won't affect your main PC. That's where this thing down here, this sandbox tool, again, you have to switch this on within your Windows features, but it produces this new window, which is a PC in itself. So you can do whatever you like in here. There's a few techniques in making it more secure. One of the things it doesn't like is a VPN being switched on when you open the window. So the idea is that you get around it by switching off your VPN, opening the sandbox, switching back your VPN on, and then this is a brand new instance that's sitting on the VPN of your host computer. And you can do anything in here. You can run malware. You can see WannaCry pop up. You can see what it does. You can actually, I wouldn't recommend this unless you know what you're doing, but if you are confident you want to play around, then malware within this system can actually just run riot, and you can see everything being encrypted, and you can see the warnings coming up, and when you close with the X up here or log out, then everything is wiped completely. So it's a nice fun thing to play with. So that's the sandboxing. I've mentioned before about the DNS providers. So 111 or Quad 1 or Quad 9 are useful. This is Cloudflare. So they're an independent US company, definitely worth having a look at. And then this is Quad 9, which is IBM, and they all filter content, they block malware and advertising pop-ups, and protect against botnets, and also some of them actually correct your typos as well, which is always useful. So that's the kind of thing. This is where you go. This is the translation tools for the internet. So when you type in your domain name, it goes away, finds the IP address, comes back, and then takes you to that address using these services. There are other things you can do. You can move across to a new technology, which is DNS over IP, which I won't go into now. But if you want to sort of look into that further, then it's a blast, real fun. Browser-wise, I tend to use DuckDuckGo for searching, and my browser on my devices, so my iPad and my phone, my Android phone and my iPad. So it's a very secure browser. It doesn't record anything you do, which is great. So it can't pop up an advert that you've just been searching on in Amazon or Facebook or eBay, whatever site you're visiting. And it's got a great thing called bangs, which is really useful. So if you know that you want to go to Amazon, for example, and you open your browser and it defaults to DuckDuckGo browser, in the search bar you type in the bang symbol, which is the exclamation mark, and then just hit enter and it will take you straight through to Amazon. Likewise, bang eBay will take you straight through to eBay, Reddit and Twitter, and you can create your own bangs as well, which is enormous fun, because you can create and submit a bang. So if you want to say, I don't know, let's say cyber marketing. So you create a bang that always goes to your website. So whenever someone puts bang cyber marketing, then it will always go to your website, and that's published. It has to be approved by DuckDuckGo, but you can see that it's got a bit of power there. And if you then send that out to your clients, or make it easy for them to actually use a bang to get to your website or your service, then it adds a little bit of fun. And then finally, SSL and TLS. These are the things that create the certificate of encryption for your websites and provide you with a nice looking lock on your domain, next to your domain. So Chrome are getting really fussy about this. So if you've got a website that's got a link or even an image that's on another website that's not got HTTPS, i.e. it's not secure, then it will then mark your website as insecure. And it says at the top, an insecure site. So it really starts to put people off. Having an SSL certificate also improves your search engine rankings. Right, let me quickly what's the time? 20 past. Sorry, there's not much time for questions. Okay, so network tips. So VPN, as I've mentioned, if you're using ExpressVPN, then they've got a great leak tool to see whether or not you're leaking information. I can provide you with a referrer link, which gives you a free 30 days and actually gives me a free 30 days as well on the back of that. I pay for the service, and it's well worth paying for. I've got 5 devices that are all covered and use it all the time. VLAN is another thing that you can introduce to your home network, which I'll show you. Let's go into VLAN now. And this is something that perhaps Richard can help you with, because he could perhaps help you and guide you with a VLAN setup. And that's just another little box that goes between your network and your router. This is typically a home network, so you've got everyone on the same network, so everyone can, in theory, access common resources and each other's PC. Whereas if you have a VLAN, you split it so that your business is on one sector and your home is on another sector. And if you've got maybe an 8-port VLAN box, you can split that 8 ways, and you can have all your IoT devices on another segment, so that they're isolated completely from your main network. So I really advocate VLAN, and I'm sure Richard can help you with that. Finally, I think we've got this last set of tips, and that's all about encryption. So make sure that you understand encryption perhaps a little bit better than you may do at the moment, understand the differences, understand how maybe emails can be encrypted. And my fingerprint that's on my business card here can be seen at the bottom here. This is my hashed key. That's a fingerprint of my public and private, or my public key, in fact. So if you want information about how to set up your emails with encryption or hashed passwords, then I can give you more information. And last but not least, don't forget to encrypt your hard drives. That's another very simple thing to do to protect your data. If you're taking your laptop around, what would happen if you lost that laptop? If you don't have it encrypted, then you've got to go through reporting it. You've got to go through ICO. You've got to go consider your the GR. I've forgotten the word now. You've got to go through your considerations for your protection of data. Whereas if you've got it encrypted, then you know, someone's not going to hack into it. They're not going to get that information. All they can do really is wipe it or remove the hard disk and put another one in and use that hardware. Physical hardware, physical locks is also important. So if you're going out and about and you're in a coffee shop, then use one of these sort of locks that are quite cheap these days, but you can wrap it around the table and no one's going to walk off with it. Sorry, that was quite a fun-packed, full-on hour almost there of information. Hopefully it didn't overwhelm you, and hopefully you've picked up one or two tips along the way. The world is scary, so don't spill water on your keyboard, because you never know what gremlins you're going to get in your system